Okay, so there's a brand new animated sports movie out, and this one's got some serious heavyweight backing. I'm talking about NBA legend Steph Curry. It's called GOAT, which is a pretty bold title. So the big question on everyone's mind is it actually the GOAT? Let's find out. But hold on a second. If you're someone who keeps up with movie news, you might be thinking, wait, GOAT? Didn't I just hear about another movie with that name? And you'd be right. There's been a ton of confusion about this, and honestly, for a pretty good reason. So let's clear the air right away. So here's what we're going to do. First, we'll tackle that GOAT identity crisis. Then we'll properly meet the animated underdog of this story. Check out the incredible voice cast and dig into what both the critics and the actual audiences are saying. And then, of course, we'll try to answer that ultimate question. Is GOAT really the GOAT? All right, first things first. Let's solve this movie mystery. We've got one name, but two completely different films. So here's the deal. On one side, you have the 2025 movie, Him, which was actually originally titled GOAT. This one's a sports horror movie from Jordan Peele. Thank you, Demonic Gory. It got a pretty rough 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now on the other side, we have the 2026 movie we're talking about today, Sony Animation's GOAT. This one is an animated action comedy from, you guessed it, Stephen Curry. It's family-friendly, heartfelt, and rocking a much better 80% score. So, yeah, just to be crystal clear, today we are all about the Steph Curry movie. Okay, now that we've got that sorted out, let's dive into the main event. It's time to meet Sony Animation's GOAT. You know, the movie's tagline pretty much sums up everything you need to know. Smalls can ball. I mean, come on, that's just perfect. It's a classic underdog story, but here's the twist. It's set in a world entirely populated by animals. So what exactly are they playing? It's this wild sport called rollerball. Just imagine the most intense, full-contact sport you can think of, and then give it to a bunch of animals. Yeah, it's a game completely dominated by the fastest, the strongest, and the fiercest creatures out there, and right in the middle of all that action is our hero Will. He's the small goat with, well, massive dreams. And he gets this one in a million chance to play in the big leagues. The only problem, his new teammates are not exactly rolling out the welcome mat. So yeah, it's all about proving that your heart is way more important than your height. You know, a story like this is great, but a huge part of what makes an animated movie like this work is the cast. And let me tell you, the star power they got to bring these animals to life is pretty incredible. Just look at this lineup. I mean, it is stacked. You've got Caleb McLaughlin from Stranger Things as our main goat, Will. Then there's Gabrielle Union, Nicola Coughlan from Bridgerton, the one and only Patton Oswalt, and hey, another Stranger Things alum, David Harbour. That's a killer cast right there. And of course, we can't forget the man who put this all together. Steph Curry isn't just sitting back as a producer, which by the way is a huge step for his media company. No, he's actually jumping into the recording booth for his first ever feature film voice role. He plays Lenny the giraffe, who's another underdog on the team. Okay, so you've got a great concept, an amazing cast, but what's the actual verdict? What does everyone think? Let's break down what both the critics and the crowd have to say. Right off the bat, the scores are interesting. You see a really solid 80% from critics on Rotten Tomatoes, which is great. But then you look over at Metacritic and it's a 59, which is much more mixed. That little gap right there tells you that there's probably a more nuanced conversation happening than just it's good or it's bad. And yep, when you dig into the actual reviews, that divide gets super clear. On the pro side, critics absolutely raved about the animation. They called it beautiful, textured, full of energy. Basically what you've come to expect from Sony Animation, right? They also loved that it was full of heart and felt sincere. But on the con side, almost every single review mentioned how predictable the story is. It follows that classic sports movie formula to a T. My favorite quote has to be the critic who called it the most sports movie to ever sports movie. You know exactly what they mean. Here's a great quote that kind of sums up the positive side of that argument. Daniel Ho from Next Best Picture wrote, well, told sports story can still feel fresh when it is powered by imagination and sincerity. So basically he's saying, yeah, we've seen the story before, but they tell it with so much creativity and heart that it just works. But then you have the other perspective, like this one from our Kennedy at the Associated Press. He said the movie is undone by a predictable saccharine script. It's as easy to see the steps coming as a Curry three-pointer. Ouch. But you got to admit, that's a pretty clever line using Steph Curry's own game against the movie. He's saying the plot is just too obvious. So what about regular people, not just critics? Well, looking at forums online, you see pretty much the same split, lots of love for the overall vibe. You see comments like a typical feel-good movie with a timeless message, and my personal favorite, the whole cinema cheered. That's awesome. But you also see people agreeing with the critics about the story. Some said the pacing is everywhere and that the story needed some breathing time. So gorgeous to look at, great message, but maybe a little too fast paced for some. Okay, so we've heard from the critics, we've heard from the audience. Let's get down to it. The final verdict. Is GOAT the GOAT? And more importantly, should you go see it? Well, I think this movie is a slam dunk for a few specific audiences. First, if you've got a family with kids and you're just looking for a fun, heartfelt movie that looks amazing, this is a definite yes. Second, if you're a sports fan who just loves a good, classic underdog story, you're going to eat this up. And third, if you're just a fan of animation and want to see what kind of visual magic Sony is cooking up now, you absolutely have to check it out. So here's the final takeaway. GOAT is a genuinely beautiful film. It's sincere, it's got a ton of heart. But it doesn't really try to reinvent the wheel when it comes to the story. Think of it like a perfectly executed play you've seen before. You know how it's going to end, but it's still awesome to watch. And that really leaves us with one last big question to think about. We live in a world that's just packed with sequels and reboots. So maybe, just maybe, a familiar story that's told with this much sincerity and this much imagination. Maybe that's exactly what we need right now. It's something to think about,